If you're responsible for marketing in a technical organization, you may very well benefit from conducting qualitative research, or rather, hiring someone who is really, really good at qualitative research to do it right. Well, I'm bringing on one of those folks today, and we'll walk through the why behind companies that engage their services, what key steps are in a qualitative research project, roundabout how much it costs to conduct qualitative research, and how AI is helping to get even smarter at analyzing results and moving things along with a project such as this. Let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, True Marketing. True is a full-service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit truemarketing.com. And now on with our podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Content Marketing Engineered. I'm joined today by David Schneer. He is the CEO and body language expert at Merrill Research, and also the author of a new book just out called Backbone: Surviving the Road Less Quantified. Welcome to the show, David, or I should say, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Wendy. It's great to be back. It's great to see you again.
Now, the last time you were here, we talked about communicating through body language, which was not exactly an easy thing to talk about on a podcast, but it turned out to be a wonderful episode. And if those listening missed it, definitely go look that up. We'll put a link in the show notes, but it was a fun conversation. And I'm excited to talk about qualitative research and your new book and all sorts of things today. How does that sound?
It sounds great. And again, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun since we announced the introduction of the book. So I'm raring to go.
All right. Well, I have a copy of it right here. If you're watching on video, you can see the cover. We're going to get to why it's called Backbone and why it has a X-ray of a back on it, or a sketch of one, whatever you call it. What would you describe that? How would you describe the cover?
Oh, it's just the graphics of a human spine.
There you go. So, spoiler. Well, we'll leave that hanging. We'll leave that till towards the end when we talk about the why behind that. But first, as setup, if you heard the previous podcast, you know that David's worked in electronics and complex technology for over 30 years. It's a very skilled, very talented qualitative researcher and body language expert. And if you pick up the book, you'll learn more about his backstory. And again, we'll touch on that later, not only your backstory, but your back story. See what I did there?
Yeah, it's a pun. That's good.
I didn't even mean to.
Literal backstory.
It just happened. It just happened. But before we get to that, a lot of people listening are in the throes of 2025 planning, and they may want to consider research as part of their process, and probably should be considering research. And so I thought we would start out by just talking about qualitative research, why people do this, what's involved in the process, just kind of get us all up to speed. And so starting with the why, why do engineering and complex tech companies engage in qualitative research?
Well, for a variety of reasons. One is some of these companies are very large, and despite their vast wealth, they can't produce all the products in their product pipeline. And so they hire companies like mine to help them determine the feasibility of the products. In other words, we act as insurance for some of these larger companies. But more importantly, the importance of qualitative research has risen recently with the pandemic. The pandemic has shattered all these quantitative measurements and norms that were gathered up until 2019. And now everything's different. And so a lot of companies are going back out to see what condition their condition is in with regard to their brand. Is their brand still relevant? Are people still shopping the same way? Are people still concerned about the same things that they were before the pandemic? And sometimes the best way to do that is through qualitative research. Okay. So another multi-billion-dollar microcontroller manufacturer hired us to understand a new generation of design engineers, which is very different than their older counterparts who are watching the clock, 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out, waiting to retire, right? The newer generation, though, they're hungry for information. They want to engage. They want to meet. They want to have a voice. And so we're learning and teaching these really large semiconductor companies how to react to all these young engineers, especially women, that are coming out of school and are looking to join the workforce. And that's been really fascinating.
I bet. And as we marketers are struggling with how to reach that generation and how differently they seek information, and there's all these proliferation of channels, right, where we can go. And so I like that it looks beyond just the quantitative research, that we do, and really gets to the motivations and the why and peels back that onion several layers deeper.
Well, the qualitative research that we're doing now is going to be, for some of our clients, a precursor for quantitative research.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
they're gonna want to measure this new reality that we're in, right? That's nothing changes if it doesn't get measured, right? So oftentimes qualitative research is used just for that purpose, to make sure that the quantitative survey is speaking in the language of the respondents, that it's actually talking to the right respondents, on and on and on.
One of the other things that we find qualitative research so valuable for is brand messaging. So brand perception, but also developing messaging that resonates, using the same terminology. That made me think of it when you said, what are those terms? What are those words that people use? Do you find that that's another valuable thing that you guys do?
It is. In those instances, we're using qualitative research, but when we're evaluating things, right, we don't do that in a group environment. We do that on an in-depth interview basis because we want to avoid groupthink.
Makes sense.
And so, what should qualitative research not be used for is precisely that, is I've seen focus groups being used for advertising. Get a group of people in a room and you like this ad, oh yeah, we love it. And it's like there's so much pollution in that group that none of those findings are valid. The general rule of thumb is, if it's exploratory and you're looking for depth of information, you want qualitative research. If it's evaluative, you want it on a personal, in-depth basis.
Okay.
Focus groups are great for generating ideas, sparking off one another, but they're not good for evaluating things because of the group environment.
That makes sense. Okay. When would you turn to quantitative research instead?
Well, quantitative research is used for we just got schooled on quantitative research with the recent election, right?
Yes, we did.
And the way that works is that there's 160 registered million voters in the U.S., and you couldn't possibly interview all of them. It would cost too much and take too much time. But by using the sampling laws and laws of statistics, we can interview like 1,300 to 1,700 people and get an idea of what that larger population is. So quantitative research is used for things like advertising tracking, We have a client now that we've been doing a tracking study for 10 years. And every year they get a budget and they want to see how well the budget has moved the needle. So we do a pre-study and then a post-study, and they're able to fine-tune their communications that way. And they're not really a large company. They're actually in healthcare.
Okay.
So there's an old adage that one of my bosses used to tell me about the difference between qualitative and quantitative research. And it's in my book. It's an analogy of the forest. And let's say, Wendy, you're a forest ranger, and it's your job to determine how many trees in the forest have bark disease and are suffering, right? And so you walk out and you look over the vast forest and you go, oh my Lord, how are we going to do that? There's so many trees here, right? Well, if you go out and you talk to a couple hundred trees and they're representative of all the other trees, and they have a known and equal chance of participating in the survey, from talking to those 100 or 200 trees, you can determine what the rest of the forest looks like, right?
Right.
But if you want to find out how photosynthesis works, how the process of light coming through the leaves and turning them green, how that process works, you don't need to talk to 100 trees, because that's a very complex process. And so qualitative research is designed for depth of information. Quantitative research is designed for reliability, predictability.
Very good analogy. Thank you. That's going to stick with me. I like that.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Well, David, walk me through what a typical project looks like. How does this all go down?
So the very first thing we do is we figure out what the objectives are, and we nail the client down on the objectives. And then the second thing we do is, okay, now who do you want to ask these questions to? Who's the target audience? So one of the first things we do, step one, is develop a screening questionnaire. It's a list of questions that list the requirements of the person that we want in this study. Okay. That's key, because no matter how good the moderator is, if you're talking to the wrong people, it just doesn't matter, right? So that's rule number one in qualitative. Well, in any research, it all boils down to the sample. But here it's very important. So a screening questionnaire, we let the client look at it, bless it. Then we go out and we start calling people and say, would you like to come to our group or our interview? While that's happening, the next thing we do is what's called a discussion guide. And that's actually the list of questions that I'm going to use during the group. Then we actually conduct the research, and that can take anywhere from a couple weeks to a month, depending on how many interviews we're doing. Are we doing them in person, or are we doing them virtual? Are we doing them international? Once we interview them, we analyze the data, then we synthesize it, and then we report it. And it takes about 6 to 8 weeks, and can cost anywhere from as little as $7,500 to sometimes as much as 50 or 60,000, depending on, again, the number.
All those factors, sure.
And again, when people participate in our research, they're just not checking boxes. They're talking to me for an hour or two. So we have to pay them. And sometimes they're pretty senior people. So it requires a lot of resources sometimes to do this type of research.
Yeah. What is a typical stipend? Or is there any such thing as a typical stipend?
Oh, there is. So you can ballpark it, like with consumer studies, a typical stipend might be $100 to come to a hour-long interview, or 2-hour focus group. We'll feed you too, right? For some of these professionals, we just got done talking to senior purchasing folks from electronics manufacturers. We were paying these guys like $500.
Wow.
Yeah. Uh, and so that's what you need to do if you want to talk to these people. Now, you consider the cost of paying me as opposed to the cost of going out in the market blind and making a mistake and having to retool your product or your services. You pay me, or you pay me now or pay me later. But it's a lot more painful to do it the other way by
Yeah,
not doing your homework.
no doubt. No doubt. So, do you find yourself on airplanes more or less now that we're post COVID? And now that more and more people are working virtually?
Way less.
Yeah, I figured you'd
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah,
Okay.
way less. Now, um, we have done in-person work, and that generally is reserved for like new product development where people kind of need to interact
Hmm.
with a
Or maybe
product.
touch and feel a product, something like that.
Right. Well, we were talking to a medical garment manufacturer who wanted to do in-person groups, and it had to be done in person because they wanted people to feel the fabric, right? So it really does depend.
Hmm.
Now, with these busy executives in purchasing, I'm not going to get them to come to a focus group, but I will get an hour of their time on some pretty uh, interesting stuff. Now, granted, some of these folks that we invite are super interested in the topic that we're asking them about because they have a lot of pain there. So they're more than willing to
Yeah,
participate.
please let me tell you all the
Yeah,
things
one
that
more
are
thing.
bothering me about this. I could see
Yeah.
that. Now I know I stated earlier that you are a body language expert, and so no doubt body language is part of your methodology when you conduct these. So tell me a little bit about that and also how doing this virtually has changed things, if anything.
Well, body language in my practice is pretty much everything, but I'm here to ring the bell that qualitative research and face-to-face interviewing in general would benefit greatly from body language. With regard to the use of body language in my studies, when I'm with a person in a focus group facility or when I'm with a group of people in a focus group facility, I oftentimes work in a facility that has glass tables and swivel chairs. And the reason that we do that, and sometimes we ask for that, the reason we do that is because when we're talking to somebody, I want to make sure that I'm watching not just their facial expressions, but their body movements. Okay. So let's say, Wendy, I'm asking you a question, and I say, Wendy, do you like this ad? And Wendy, you say, oh, I like it. And you turn away and you look away and you come back and you look down. My spidey senses are tingling about that. And I'm thinking there's something about that that she doesn't like. And so my antenna goes up and I would probably circle back and say, so tell me more about this ad. Are you sure? I'd kind of do it that way. Now, moderators that aren't trained in body language would let that go. Just with the figure the person just leaned back. So the legs are very important indicators of emotion. The feet are always pointed in the direction that the body wants to go. They're a great beacon of behavior, your feet. And so when we are talking to people, we want to make sure that we see their legs and their feet. Are they wrapping their feet around the chair? Which would be an indicator that they're uncomfortable, that they're not liking the conversation. Are they doing a thigh massage? Now, you can't see this now, right? Because we're virtual, but I'm rubbing my thighs. Now, an astute observer would notice my shoulders going back and my shirt moving and would wonder what's going on down there, right? But I can see that with a glass table, right? And plus, you can really watch people squirm in a swivel chair. So that's how we use it because, yeah, why don't, but somebody asked me this the other day, why don't people just be truthful? Why don't they just tell you they don't like it? Well, people oftentimes just want to please,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
I seem
sure.
like a nice guy, it's not my advertising. I could care less whether they like it or not. And I tell them this, and I tell them they're going to get paid the same amount
Yeah.
Just tell me the truth. But still, they withhold.
Yeah.
They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, right? Uh, so it's super important, and everything has changed with the pandemic except one thing. Okay. Let's talk about what's changed. As a result of the pandemic, most interviewing has switched from in person to virtual, right? Now, as a result of the pandemic, many of those facilities closed,
Mm.
out of business.
Hmm.
Now, the other facilities that were languishing were bought up by the large focus group facility change. Other facilities just threw in the towel, said, I'm done with this. People aren't coming to my facility. I have rent to pay. A lot of them switched to virtual, but in the end, a lot of them just gave up.
So
And
I
and
missed the half price glass table sale with
yeah,
all those glass tables.
yeah, grab one. They're a bitch to clean, but they're really revealing. And I actually had a client. I was training a client down in LA, and they actually bought one before I came there, and it was great to see how they use it. But back about what's changed is focus group facility databases were used to find respondents. Well, those
Interesting.
databases have now, or they're as old
Gone.
as stale bread, right?
Yeah.
And so now LinkedIn savvy recruiters are picking respondents off for us on LinkedIn. A whole new group of recruiters have come up to fill in the
Huh.
void.
Okay.
And the only thing that hasn't changed is that moderators are still relying to, and I'm here to change that. Moderators and interviewers need to pay less attention to what is said and more attention to what is done and how that looks. Okay. And there's a lot to learn. And the book talks about that, how important that really is. And I would just love to train a new generation of folks about this.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a nice segue into the book. So, how about we go there next? So, it's called Backbone: Surviving the Road Less Quantified. And, when I first opened it, I expected, oh, it's going to be just this typical, this not typical, but, B2B book talking about why you do this research and some of the things that we talked about today. And instead, you hit me immediately with a lot of personal stories, which grabbed me, and I thought, where is he going with this? So anyway, I really enjoyed reading your book. What was your catalyst to write the book, and who did you write it for?
So let me answer the second question first. When you read the dedication, people have asked me, did you write it for your wife, Svetlana? And the answer is no. I wrote it because of her. And because of her, I was able to heal in such a way as that I was able to write the book. Uh, I wrote the book for the qualitative research industry. We all have these jobs, and I don't know about you, Wendy, you seem to really like your job, but I love my job. And I wanted to push the envelope, and I almost was cut short of that ability to do that. But I pushed through with a lot of determination and a lot of grit to write this book as part of a metaphor, a much larger metaphor for what it takes to do corporate qualitative research at this level, where you're constantly traveling, where every night is worth $15,000 or $30,000, where clients are watching you, right, perform. You're bone tired. I mean, it takes a lot of grit. In fact, I invited one of my colleagues to co-write one of those chapters because he's a grizzled qualitative research vet, and he went through some horrific stuff and came through a better, stronger person. And so, I wanted to raise the bar for qualitative research. I wanted to make it a better profession than when I entered it.
You absolutely put the reader in the shoes of what it takes to do your job well. But you also had, like you said, this great analogy or comparison to what you were suffering with, what you were enduring in your personal life through your neck and back injuries and your multiple surgeries and all of the unexpected setbacks and the grit and determination that you had to have in your personal life as well. And I don't want to spoil too much. I want people to get the book and read about it, but it was just a beautiful way to talk about both and simultaneously and make it very engaging.
Thank you. We talked a lot about this, and I thought, who's going to read a book on focus groups? I mean, blah. And then we thought a lot about it. And it wasn't really about focus groups. It was about doing the focus groups. And then we go, okay, now there's a story.
Yeah.
And then we realized nobody else has really done this or written about this. And that became even more challenging and unique. And I didn't tell anybody for 18 months. I did
Really?
not tell a soul about
Wow.
this. There were maybe a handful of people that knew, that kind of had to know. But I didn't say anything to my wife, to my family. So this has been like one massive surprise.
How fun.
Yeah, it was.
So in the book, and it's not easy to talk about this subject because it changes so rapidly right now. But you have a section or whatever we want to call it on AI. Maybe it's a chapter. I don't remember now. And I thought that was important for us to touch upon today. So, one, I think it was great that you acknowledged how quickly this is all changing and will continue to change. And I have this quote written down. You say that you're on the edges of corporate qualitative research where nonverbal intelligence and AI collide to provide powerful insights on human emotion. Wow. Okay. So we talked about nonverbal. We've talked about qualitative research in general. How does all of that collide with AI? What does that collision look like?
Well, it's a burst of illumination, really. I pushed the envelope in qualitative research when I started to talk about the importance of body language. All right. But now there's AI that's trained to observe the same facial micro expressions that I am. We've been working with a Mumbai-based company that has developed an algorithm that is very accurate, very sensitive, and we've been working with them for the last several years. And I mean, before the big buzz of AI, we were doing this and trying to be quiet about it because we weren't quite sure where it was going to go until we had an opportunity to use it in a study. And what happens is I'm interviewing you, right? And let's say, Wendy, you give me a sign of contempt, all right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's a little bit. It's actually contempt is an asymmetrical smile. It's like this,
Like a little smirk.
very fast,
Okay.
and you can't control it. You can, but in a real micro expression, when
Yeah.
somebody's fighting back their emotions, they'll show that,
Mm.
which means I don't necessarily like what you're saying, or it means I'm superior. But anyway, let's say I spot that
Hmm.
because I just asked you about something you didn't like. Well, the AI is now trained to spot that. And when we go back and see the analysis, I see it, the AI sees it, and we stop and we look and we go down to the transcripts and we look and we see what it was that caused that reaction. It
Mm.
just doesn't get much more powerful than that.
Yeah.
Well, so how do you use that? Well, we were talking to design engineers about sustainability of all things because we had a client, the board of directors called the CEO and said, "Hey, I'm reading all this stuff about sustainability. What do our customers think about sustainability?" This is a microprocessor manufacturer that's asking
Hmm.
this, right? And so the CEO says, "I don't know. Let's call marketing." Call marketing. Marketing says, "Well, sustainability. I mean, We don't really have anything on sustainability. Well, let's go get some research going on that because the board wants to know which way to go on sustainability. And while we're up, let's check out DEI too. So we start interviewing these design engineers, right? And we're asking them, how important is it in your design in process that the manufacturer from whom you buy has a solid sustainable record? On a scale of 1 to 10, we asked a scalar question just to
Mm-hmm.
nail them down. 1 is I don't care, and a 10 is it's extremely important. Well, what they said, and we have slides and slides and slides of this. Everyone is slide. Oh, yeah, that's a 5 or 6, 6 or 7. But what we saw and what the AI saw was a complete flatlining of emotions.
Oh, interesting. So I'm
And
giving the response that I feel is PC, if you will, or appropriate, but my heart is, whatever elsewhere.
yeah,
Is
now I'm seeing this real time. I'm seeing like surprise
Mhm.
because they're wondering, why is he even asking me this? Because I don't
Yeah.
care about sustainability because I can't get my parts for 52 weeks.
Right, right.
I'm pulling my hair out. And you want to talk to me about
I
sustainability?
have bigger priorities. Got
Talk
you.
to me about the supply chain, please. You know, and well, and you go, okay, well, so we sent that back up to the board and they, okay, you can talk about sustainability, but it's not your best first punch, okay?
Hmm.
And then they decided to do this with purchasing. And that was a real eye opener because purchasing has a real long memory about the things that were done to them during the pandemic,
Ah,
right?
yeah.
All the allocations, all the long
Hmm.
lead times, all the price gouging, all this stuff. And we actually showed the senior management of this huge company just how pissed these people were
Yeah.
at them. And so now they're doing something about it.
Good.
So it's very powerful, Wendy, and it's a lot of fun.
So David, one of the things that resonated with me in the book is you talked a bit about your father was an engineer, as was mine. Neither one of us, you and I, pursued engineering degrees, but here we are, neck deep in engineering, working on very complex technical subjects, applications, and having to learn at least enough to where we can grasp the topic and sound smart and move forward. And so what advice do you have for marketers listening that are in similar shoes? How do you pull that off when you're talking technical product releases, all the things that you've done as a moderator? How do you handle that?
It's just experience and study. I mean, electronics is when you start to study it, it almost seems like another foreign language. And then you add in all the acronyms, and then you're really going, whoa. First of all, complex things just intrigue me. Uh, and you really have to understand the technology that you're asking about so that you can probe deeply. Now, there were times when I had to sit, when the conversation got so technical that I had to sit in the room with another engineer to kind of help me through it. Uh, that's rare. I think that was an FPGA conversation that got way out of hand with fabrics and cores and all sorts of stuff. And it was talking to very, very senior people that were just super smart. But being able to handle and understand complex notions is paramount, I think, to work in this industry. So you're not an engineer, but you have a general understanding of how electronics work, what engineers want. You do research, right?
Yeah.
So that's a completely different skill. And I can make the argument that, it's far better for me to go into a focus group not as an engineer because I'm not wedded to any technical methodologies. I'm not afraid to ask stupid questions. I take nothing for granted, right? And so oftentimes I ask some questions that just seem so basic and silly, but yet it stumps people.
I think that's my favorite part right
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Where did your dad? He's electrical engineer?
No, he's actually civil and my brother's electrical. So
Okay. Well,
I'm
runs in the
outnumbered.
family. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I never wanted to be an engineer, but I really did love, following him around
Yeah.
as a young child. It just seems so long ago. Uh, and seeing how these things are made, it's way different now, but it's we take it all for granted when we wear our watches and we plug in our freezers and refrigerators and everything has semiconductors in them now.
Yep. Everything and sensors and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Clothing, yeah.
Well, those of you listening, if you pick up the book, you can read a little bit of that backstory and just how much of the semiconductor evolution you saw through going to work with dad and all of your moves. It was pretty cool to read about that. But so where can people find this? Amazon, I
It
assume, or
is
your website? Where?
uh best to go to Amazon.
Okay.
It's an ebook and paperback. We're toying with the idea of audio. We'll see what the feedback is, but yeah, we're excited, and we just got a nice review from US Review, recommended the book. So it's like having a baby. You know, it's it's painful. It's and then you bring this child into the world, and then it's just, will people like it? Will the child be good? Will it? And it's really, it's a great experience, but it's very different. Well, you would know. I mean,
Yes.
I didn't know. This is my first time, so it was a lot of fun.
Well,
So
congratulations.
thank
And
you.
book aside, if people would like to connect with you and learn more about Merrill Research, where can they do that?
They can go to www.merrillresearch.com, or they can just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn. And if you can't find me on LinkedIn, then you really don't know how to use it.
All
I
right. Well,
should be.
I'll make sure to include a few links in the show notes too to shortcut it for spelling and that sort of thing. But
Thank you.
great. Well, wonderful visiting with you today. Thanks for coming back on.
Thank you. I really appreciated it.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.